The Detroit Tigers are given the second highest odds in their division to make the postseason. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Pete Alonzo signing and what it could mean for the rest of the slowly moving market and plenty more. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, February 7th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you all had a fantastic week. Hopefully we'll send you into the weekend here with a decent show. That was a good pause before including YouTube. That was a really drawn out and long break there in between there. There was a point where it was getting longer and longer and longer, and I had to be like, all right, like we gotta shorten this thing up. I'm waiting, 15 seconds. That was a pretty good one. We got a lot of small things to talk about on today's show. There's no huge overarching Tigers news, at least, but there is a ton of news throughout baseball, and a handful of said news could impact your Detroit Tigers. So we'll talk about it kind of through that perspective and that angle. We're going to start off by talking about Fangraphs postseason odds that were released on, I believe, Wednesday, earlier this week. They came out with their first edition of playoff odds, and then Fangraphs updates it all the time. So they always start in early February, release the playoff, and it's playoff, win division, win World Series, like all of just the odds you can think of. And then as, some more signings are going to happen, as obviously games are played, injuries happen, et cetera, then those will change and be adjusted. Always fun to keep an eye out for. The Tigers notoriously had a 0.2% chance of making the postseason in August, and then turned it around and did. So obviously all of that is to be said with a grain of salt. If anybody knows it, it is this fan base. We're going to talk about Pete Alonzo to the Mets a little bit, how it affects Bregman. We'll talk Bregman specifically. We'll talk about some other third basemen that are signed. Some just news and notes around baseball that I feel like I kind of just want to address. And then we'll end by talking about spring training games that are going to be on TV for your Tigers. So Fangraphs says the Detroit Tigers have a 47% chance of making the MLB postseason. I believe it is technically 46.9% at the time of this recording, which is like 7:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 6th of February. So, first instant reaction is just like, oh, it's not bad. That's still insinuating that the Tigers would miss the postseason more often than they would make it if this season was played out multiple times, or that it is more likely for them to miss the postseason than to make it. But 47% in February is the highest this team has had in a long time. I want you to actually think about how long it's been. Tell me the last time going into a spring training, okay, in early February, the last time you thought the Tigers had maybe even a 50-50 shot of making the postseason. Because it's not since COVID, right? And like last year was objectively more than it had been in a while as well. There was a lot more optimism surrounding the Tigers than there had been in a while. But there's a difference between 0%, which is, I think, what the vibe kind of was going into 2023 after the disastrous 2022, versus legitimately almost, you're talking about a pick 'em at just dang near 50-50. That's pretty high. Now, everything's relative. I say that's pretty high. The Dodgers have like a 98% chance of making, or 99% chance of making the playoffs. So everything's relative. But this is, I think, truly the highest the Tigers have had going into a season since it might be 2016. You might be able to convince me that it was 2017, maybe. Like before everything kind of just like hit the fan in 2017 and they did go full sell mode. But like I think the writing was kind of on the wall. Like this team had taken some pretty sizable step backs from 2014, 2015. Everybody was hurt. That year barely even counts in my brain. 2016 really was kind of like the last hurrah, and they should have made the postseason. They were a game back going into the final weekend of the season, and they played the Braves, who obviously now are the big bad Braves. Back then, they were terrible. That was like the worst team in baseball. And I think they dropped 2 of 3 from them and missed the postseason. Anyway, I think there's a legitimate argument. It has been 9 years since a Tigers team has had this type of odds, or even not even if we're just like, forget the word odds, just this amount of optimism going into a season. Again, there was some last year, but this year is really, I feel like, different, and it kind of just feels like there's actually an established team and core here. It's not just we're hoping for a lot of stuff to go right. There is a lot of stuff that is going right and will go right in 2025, and it's just a matter of how high this core can climb. 47% is the second highest odds in the AL Central to make the postseason. The Twins are in first with 55%. The Royals are in third with 43%. The Cleveland Guardians, after having one of the best records in baseball last year, one of the best records in the American League in 2024, slide in at just 18.6% chance to make the postseason. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Maybe that's just recency bias talking, but I always feel like I weirdly have to go to bat for Cleveland, and like they're a rival that I don't particularly like, but I find myself every preseason, like around spring training, all the big market or big media personalities are just kind of like, oh, like Cleveland's whatever, they're not going to do a whole lot. And I always have to be the one that's like, no, Cleveland's like always good and always competitive. Why would you think that? And I hate that I have to be that person on a semi-consistent basis. To win the division, the Twins highest odds at 36%, so over a third. That's pretty sizable. The Twins, I just said that. The Tigers, rather, at 29.5%. The Royals at 25%. The Guardians just at 9%, according to Fangraphs. A lot of hate for the Cleveland Guardians in Fangraphs offices here. I find that absolutely fascinating, given how good of a year they had last year. They haven't really lost any like sizable contributors. They haven't like seen a ton of production walk out the door. I think it's fascinating. I think it also could be like the Tigers, the division just getting better. You saw obviously 3 postseason teams last year and the Twins barely missing out. So maybe it's something to do with that too. But as pointed out by plenty of people, a big reason why the 4 of the teams in the AL Central were very good was because everybody beat up on the Chicago White Sox, who are given a 0% chance to win the division. Not 0.1, literally 0. And to make the postseason, they are given a 0.1% chance. Let's talk about how those odds could change with some upcoming moves, and then we'll talk about some World Series odds that I find interesting around baseball as well. We'll do that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions of awarded winnings, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on all the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard and you win. Pair that with one more correct pick and you can cash out. This week, I'm looking at the board. Again, I'm taking more on Travis Kelce receiving yards, as much as it pains me to say, and more for quarterbacks passing yardage. What I love most is there's fast and safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. So check out the promos tab as well. You can tell any of the super sweet Millie winners in their big game lineups. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can split the 1 million prize in promo funds. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday, where we are back to 5 episodes a week. We have made it through another off season. I know the spring training isn't even back yet, but pitchers and catchers report next week. And in the eyes of the Locked On Podcast Network, once that happens, baseball is back in season. So we are back to 5 episodes a week, coming at you Monday through Friday from now until December again of 2025. So going to be a fun calendar year, hopefully, for the Detroit Tigers. And I appreciate you all for joining in on this program for another year. This will be, my 5th different season already? 4th calendar year? Something like that. I don't know. I've been doing this a while. I absolutely love it. And I appreciate you all greatly, for real. Hopefully it is a fun year. And we talked a lot, obviously, before the break there about the Tigers' playoff odds. An article that I urge everyone to read is go check out Evan Petzold of the Freep. I know I shout him out literally like episodely at this point. But great human being, great dude, and very, very good at his job. Go check out his article where he talks about the odds shifting if the Tigers were to sign Bregman and how these percentages would change dramatically. We're talking by one website's usage, like double-digit % swing if the Tigers were to sign Alex Bregman. That is massive. Okay. And we're, again, like, they're not low right now. They're not leading the AL Central, but they're second pretty much across the board in the eyes of Fangraphs. That's really exciting. That means even if the Tigers are quiet the rest of the offseason here, like that would be, I guess, somewhat disappointing. But like, I don't even know if that's really the word that I want to use. Like that would be a decision. It would be a decision by the front office that I'm not sure everybody would agree with, and I'm not sure I would agree with, but it also doesn't mean like they have to sign this one person or else the season's over. Like they should be playing competitive baseball this summer. And that's really, really exciting. I think that's why a lot of people want, Bregman so bad is there's a belief that he would be kind of the bow on top, the cherry on top to push them over the edge and take them into maybe the preseason favorites in the American League Central. Some other stuff that I found interesting was the Dodgers were given a 24% chance, wait for it, to win the World Series. If that seems astronomically and just disproportionately large to you, it's because it is. That is a ridiculous number. That is absurd. I'm not sure I've ever seen, these numbers haven't existed my whole life. It's not like these, we have 100 years of data points to choose from here, but I'm not sure I've seen a preseason, a pre-spring training odds-on favorite to win the World Series be about a quarter odds. That is remarkably high. So the Dodgers are at 24%. The Braves are at 15%. No one else in baseball is above 8. No one else is even at 8. The next highest is the Yankees at 7.7%. So you have two teams. Fangraphs is saying that in over a third of the times that this season is played out start to finish, that either the Dodgers or the Braves win the World Series. Over a third. That is remarkable. And that is where a lot of the talent in baseball is. That is where a lot of the money in baseball is. Obviously, more so with the Dodgers. We'll see, where the Mets play into all of that, given their high payroll as well. Speaking of the Mets, what a transition. That was an accident. What a beautiful transition. What a happy Friday, everybody. Pete Alonzo signs a 2-year, $54 million deal with the New York Metropolitans. So 254, it's a $10 million signing bonus as well. So even though that's not part of his salary, he is getting $10 million just for writing his signature, which is unfathomable to people like oh, I don't want to say to you and I, maybe you're a cajillionaire too, and in that case, welcome to the show as well. But for the average folk, that is absolutely ridiculous that he's getting 10 mil literally to just put his name on a piece of paper. There is also an opt-out after year one. This is something that we're seeing with more and more Boris clients, and I think that that's why I'm bringing it up on this show, because Bregman is obviously a Boris client. It is, this whole Pete Alonso thing is fascinating to me. So he could have had a 3-year deal, took a 2-year instead with an opt-out after one. This past season was his age 29 season. He just turned 30 in December. So this will be his age 30 year. And I'm hoping, that this just means a Bregman decision is soon. Whether he picks the Tigers or not, I just want this saga to be over, really, at this point. And I obviously have been an advocate for him to be a Tiger. I think the Tigers should go after him. I think it's a good move. I'm tired of waiting at this point. So, there's a hope that it leads to that. But I really do think that a lot of the conversation, you look at the last year and a half, you look at this offseason and last offseason, really, and you see a lot of Boris clients, I almost said Bregman clients, a lot of Boris clients that are, going into the offseason, it's okay, we want 5, 6, 7 years, we want a long-term deal. And then as the offseason goes along, that opportunity does not present itself, and they end up taking this like 30 mil AAV, which is what Alonzo's getting, by the way. He's getting dang near 30 mil in year one, and then if he opts in, it's about 24, 25 in year two. So you're seeing these really high AAV short-term deals with a bunch of opt-outs, as opposed to them taking the big long-term deal. And I think part of that is just because it takes two to tango, right? If a team doesn't offer you a long-term deal, then guess what? You're not getting a long-term deal. Kind of how it works, believe it or not. But I also think the opt-outs, as I mentioned earlier with the Flaherty deal, I really don't, from a team perspective, can't stand player options. And that's why this is going to shock you. Players love them because it gives them all of the control. If they are playing better than their market value, then Pete Alonso could just be a free agent again in 12 months. Not even. He can be a free agent again in 10 months, right? When the Mets get eliminated in the NLDS. It's a joke for my Mets fans. I love you. I'm sorry, but So it's a fascinating thing to play this I don't know, like waiting this long into the offseason. It almost feels like Boris has become used to just playing this game of chicken. He did it with Montgomery last year, Blake Snell as well. Like, it took them forever to sign. We're talking about into spring training. Now we have Bregman and Alonzo that are here. Like, he's waiting, and then ending up taking these sorts of deals. And that makes this latest update on Bregman even more fascinating. We'll talk about that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together, as we very fondly remember last season. Unfortunately, not as much for your Detroit Lions this season. But the excitement and energy of a playoff game I attended last year was unmatched, and I'm looking forward to making new memories in the 2025 calendar year. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your live events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I recently used Game Time Picks to get tickets for a Detroit Pistons game. All of those games pretty much feel like playoff games currently. Browsing through deals was simple, and I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The Super Deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout made the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me some peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, everybody, welcome back. Your third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So, as I have said many times, I am so tired of all of these Bregman updates because they pretty much just change every 5 minutes. The newest one is that, believe it or not, Bregman still wants a long-term deal. That is the latest round of updates, and that doesn't really surprise me. We talked about earlier in the week how the Cubs offered Bregman something north of 100. I think John Heyman reported it. North of 100 mil, 4 years with an opt-out. That's a little bit over 25 AAV if it's over 100 mil. And if 4 years isn't enough, then you're probably, again, talking about somewhere in the 5 to 6 range. I can't imagine there's a team out there that's going to be willing to do 7, but I mean, you never know with these kind of things. Maybe it's the Tigers. Maybe it's again, maybe it's one of the other, the Red Sox. Maybe the Cubs adjust their offer, et cetera, et cetera. But it might take years for him. Like every player has different incentives and has different. Well, everybody is different. Believe it or not, everybody's different. So it's just one of those things where different things matter more to different people. You have guys that are, maybe Alonzo was more like, you know what, just give me the most amount of money I can make this year and I'll figure out the long-term deal next offseason. And that's why he has the opt-out and kind of bet on himself a little bit more. And maybe Bregman's at a point where he's like, just get the most years possible. I'm not doing free agency again. I just want to know where I'm going to live for the rest of my baseball career. So we'll see what happens, but that update would lead you to believe that if you are in the pro Bregman to Detroit camp, that you are going to have to give up quite a few years to be able to do that. And my hope would be that if that was the case, that you could substitute or not substitute, but trade off rather years for AAV. I'm significantly more comfortable with giving him a longer term deal if the AAV is lower than that, like 28 to 30 mil a year range. So we'll see what happens. But that is going to continue to be obviously one of the biggest stories in baseball. I think now that Alonzo's gone, it probably is the biggest story remaining in baseball. Speaking of third baseman, I've played some second base too, but Yoan Moncada signs with the Los Angeles Angels, 1 year, $5 million. I think this is great value. I think the Angels are just kind of in the business of, where the Tigers were for so long, right? Like they're going to take cheap, try to get the most bang for their buck. They're going to try to take these low risk, high reward type of deals. I think that's exactly what Moncada is. I actually really like this deal for the Angels, and yeah, we'll see what happens. If he gets anywhere near to what he was putting up in his peak years in Chicago, then this is going to work out great for them, and they should be able to flip him at the deadline or extend him. And if he's not, and it's more of what we saw last year, and which was an injury-riddled year for him, but if it's closer to that level of production, then it's $5 million for a year, and who cares? Otani's interpreter Ipe, 5 years in prison. One of the biggest stories in baseball. Absolutely fascinating story. There was some phone calls that were leaked earlier in the offseason where he literally is on the phone pretending to be Shohei Ohtani and like withdraw money and talk to casinos and whatnot. Just an absolutely wild story. And yeah, the hearing was, or sentencing, whatever the correct terminology is, was on Thursday, and he will get up to 5 years in prison. What else happened around baseball? MLB's account was talking about Riley Green. We love that. Pro Riley Green agenda being pushed at the national level. Good to see that. Another thing I think is kind of fascinating, ESPN and Major League Baseball, go check out an article that was written by The Athletic. Not Cody Stavenhagen, unfortunately, who's our favorite athletic writer, but was written by one of the baseball staffers at The Athletic, talked about how there's a potential fracture in that relationship between MLB and ESPN. And that's something that's, Sunday Night Baseball, MLB on ESPN, that's been a thing for over 35 years. Right, you're talking about the early '90s being like the inception of that, and it's like they're going to play out the 2025 season. It'll still have Sunday Night Baseball and all that, but there is a kind of some rumbling starting that this might not be, past 2025. There's some huge question marks about whether this relationship continues from 2026 and beyond. So again, not a done deal yet. They could come out, tomorrow that they have a deal done and everything's good and they got the number to where all parties wanted it to be. But just a really, really fascinating conversation, because that's something that for a lot of people, it's like, for me, my whole life, MLB has been on ESPN and Sunday Night Baseball has been a thing. So just crazy to hear a storyline like that, something we will definitely keep an eye on. Tiger spring training, we've ended the last few episodes talking about it. They released the broadcast schedule. There are 9 spring training games on television. Boo. I don't understand. And like, I do, it's definitely financial, but like, how are we in 2025 and we're getting like 9 of 20 something or 30 something spring training games televised? It's ridiculous to me. And like, I'm not asking you to send down the A+ broadcast team. Like, I don't need, if they want to, more power to them. But like, I don't need you to pay like Benetti and all of the great people and on-air personalities at Bally to like go down there and broadcast every game. Have a broadcast list thing. Just I subscribe to minor league baseball TV, MILB TV, every year, and it's like some dude on a camcorder in center field holding it with his bare hands, and you can barely see what's going on. Like, just do that for all I care. It is mind-boggling to me that in 2025 we can't even have 50% of crazy thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of a team called the Los Angeles Angels. They broadcast every single spring training game, all of them, every single one. The Angels have been a joke. And that's like not disrespect. Until this past year, the Tigers and Angels were tied for the longest playoff drought in Major League Baseball. Like, we were right there with them. Okay, this is a brothers in arms thing, not a you suck, push you away thing. We've been through the trenches together. Okay, and they broadcast all 30 of their spring training games every year and have for a while, for years now. They've done that. We're getting 9. And like, I'm sure this is just frustration because it would make my job significantly easier if I could watch every spring training game. But golly, I get on this soapbox every year and I throw a tantrum. So there you go. You don't have to hear that again for another 12 months. The spring breakout game as well is March 16th. I think this is great for baseball. I hope they do it every single year. I think that it is a very rare marketing home run by Major League Baseball and a sport that has shot itself in the foot so often with marketing over the years. I think the spring breakout game is a great example of a huge marketing win that they absolutely should do every year. And we'll see which Tigers play in it. I'd imagine McGonigal will probably headline that. We'll see. Can you play 2 years in a row? Like Clark played in it last year. Maybe he plays in it again. I don't know. Job certainly won't because he's trying to make the team, and the Tigers aren't going to want him to use his arm on a meaningless all-star game. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday as we start our first week back at full, at in season. 5 episodes a week coming starting next week. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.